Hi, everyone. This is episode number 10. I am a Jewish mother. At least our guests are Jewish mothers. And I am so excited because we know that each mother is unique and each mother holds the world and the future in her hands. But in subtle and sometimes not so subtle ways, moms share things with other mothers, with traditions, with culture. And this is absolutely one of my favorite topics. How are you today, Rabbi Steinhardt?
I'm well. It's also a topic I like also, but it's a challenging topic in certain ways.
Okay, so tell us where your eggshells are.
Well, I think that popular culture, certainly going back to modern American Jewish literature, really denigrated the Jewish mother as being overburdensome and highly opinionated and boundaryless. And so it created a really bad image for the Jewish mother. And yet historically, the Jewish mother is given great weight and really and beautiful values. So that's where we're weighing those two things. Also, and the role of women in general has changed dramatically in the last few decades. And so that has obvious implications for the Jewish mother.
And I love it. I want to go into all of that as much as we can in a short podcast. And I feel like um, there is a weight to it, but I changed the topic title from "What is a Jewish mother," which I thought, no, that can't be. That's somebody else defining a culture. And I thought, I want to change it to "I am a Jewish mother" and let the Jewish mothers speak for themselves. Own the pieces of the tradition or the cliches that they feel like owning and throw out the rest. I do have a definition of a Jewish mother from Urban Dictionary that I found this morning, and it said, a Jewish mother is an unstoppable force of nature that will feed you, pamper you, and pester you at the slightest provocation. I'm waving my hands here. Known to spout Yiddish randomly. Be warned, if you come to my house, you will leave with a full stomach and a bag of leftovers. And I will say that the unstoppable force of nature is the part that I most love about this. And I also love even that I was a little bit taken aback by the pester, but I thought what I love as I started to share time with Jewish mothers here at B'nai Torah 20 years ago, young Jewish mothers, is that Jewish mothers have a voice. And that is something that I feel really excited about the power of being a Jewish mother. But we have three amazing guests today. We have Carol Cohen, grandmother, Jewish mother, and we have her daughter, Stacy Cohen, and we have who we're meeting for the very first time, Heather Samuels, who is a Jewish mother, but is also married to now I presume a Catholic man. So we have some of the interfaith pieces. Carol, let me pass it to you. Um, what does the phrase mean to you? What's your experience? What do you identify and not? And how do you compare that to who your daughter is and her friends as a Jewish mother? Welcome.
So I definitely love that definition you got off of Urban Dictionary. I think it is spot on with everything. I do notice that I probably pester a little bit more than my daughter and her friends.
Not more than Heather, but more than me for sure.
and I definitely feel like I am like a force to be reckoned with, because and that not only extends to my kids, but also to my grandkids and all of my kids' friends. First of all, yes, they all come to my house, they all eat at my house, and they do all leave with leftovers. I could tell you what some of their favorites are, because they come for breakfast very often, and I intentionally buy a little extra to be able to send them home with leftovers.
Beautiful.
As far as a force to be reckoned with, yeah, I support these kids like 200%. I don't get in their way. They are more of a force to be reckoned with than I am. I am only as it relates to them. Don't get in my way as far as how I could take care of them. but they're in every way.
I love it. And the nurturing and the caretaking is so much a part of this. Stacy?
Well, my mom takes care of my kids. Everybody knows that between Heather and me and my mom, and maybe a couple nannies here and there, my kids get taken care of. We're sort of like a communal parent for my kids. But my kids know that. And like Eli, especially my oldest, like he could write that definition of what is a Jewish mother, and he would have that exactly. But he would include things like challah on Shabbat, because that's what, that's what we do. So that's what he thinks is Jewish. And, he knows, to the kid's perspective is different too.
Yes.
My kids go to Jewish day school, and not because we're particularly religious in any way, but because that's the community I wanted them raised in. I went to Jewish summer camp, but I went to secular school. But now Eli has learned, because to jump in for Heather, part of Heather being a Jewish mother is I hear Heather say all the time that her kids are going to go to Hebrew school. And so my kids want to know all about what's Hebrew school and are they going to go to Hebrew school? And so we talk about, there's Jewish at home, there's Jewish outside of home, like you're Jewish everywhere, but people do Jewish things different ways. So I guess the way I Jewishly parent, other than sending my kids to day school, is we do Friday night, we do Shabbat, and they have my mom. Like they have my mom.
Yeah.
So that she Jewish mothers the crap out of my kids.
Bravo.
So I will say that Sammy loves my matzo ball soup. He only likes to eat the matzo balls, of course. Eli loves the chicken soup. And when they happen to be at my house on a Friday night, if I am not making Shabbat dinner, they're a little confused and perplexed.
I love it. I do want to come back to the whole Jewish food piece of this, because I think it's bigger. I mean, it is the nurturing, it is the caretaking, but I think, Rabbi, maybe from your perspective, it's also Jewish at your family table. It's where we come together. It's where we do our blessings. It's so a snippet on that, Rabbi, and then I want to pass it to Heather, who has a unique perspective on this too. Food, Rabbi. What's that? How does food connect to a Jewish mother in your eyes?
In a big way. I mean, both Stacy and Carol mentioned Shabbat, and challah. So that the food thing is big in terms of the fact that we have a ritual meal, once a week. And so feeding for that meal and for all the other holidays is really an important piece in it. But I think there's something broader, something else about nourishing, wanting to give, that the nourishment is a symbol of love. Yeah. And so that's really important. Now, I will say, I'm inside a Jewish world all the time. So I really want to hear from Heather in terms of, don't get yourself in trouble here, but like, what do you feel is the difference in terms of what your kids get from your mom as opposed to your mother-in-law? Is there something distinctly different? I mean, are we saying that this is a Jewish mother because that's what we know, but all mothers are like this, right? Or not?
No.
I have a very different kind of mother. My mother is a nurse. My mother would burn anything she tries to cook, right? So it's a different type of mothering that I experience and that I give to my kids. But the nagging, the unstoppable force, that's her. you know, my grandmother, I'm very fortunate. She's 90 years old. She's still alive. And she, you know, she's more of a traditional Jewish mother, Jewish grandmother. You know, why don't you have more children? You work too much. You need to do this. You need to come visit me. If you don't come visit me, I'm going to die soon. I haven't seen the kids. I haven't seen you. So the unstoppable force fits in. You know, my mother is a nurse. And so it was, you know, you have to do this, you have to do this. You're not sick, go to school, you know, type thing. So it's a little bit different. And it's not so much about the food. You know, I like to bake challah with my daughter. She likes to braid and she likes to do the dough. But she says, you know, we make it and then she says to me, she says, I like Stacy's challah better because she cooks it differently. I like it fully cooked. Stacy likes it half cooked.
That's true.
So we do that and we spend a lot of time together. But it's interesting, you know, my mother and my mother-in-law are very different. You know, my husband's family is Italian, and so there's a comedian. His name is Sebastian Maniscalco, and he's married to a Jewish woman. And he says, you know, the Italians and the Jews, it's same behavior, different.
Your mother-in-law is pretty Jewish.
So, you know, my mother-in-law fits in all those Jewish stereotypes, right? She's a very good cook. She's very, very pushy. She's controlling. She takes over in ways that my mother would step back and say, you know, that's not my role. But my mother will make me feel guilty that I don't take over and make it fair for her. And so it's different, you know, based on the cultures and the people. But, you know, if when my grandmother is present, it's a whole different dynamic because my grandmother is the matriarch of the family. She has, even when my grandfather was alive, she was always the boss. She was always the leader. And so it's a very different thing. And when I married out, my grandmother, I was afraid that she'd be very upset. She was like, "Are you sure you're not Jewish?" When you met them, because, you know, to her, they were the same as her. And so it's different when you marry out. But when you marry out into a family that, you know, comes together in the same sort of cultural way, even though it's different cultures, it works. And it works for us. And we keep all of the holidays. And we do most of our Jewish things, I would say, with Stacy and her family. And it works for us. You know, when we were talking before about, you know, how we raise our kids together, it's true. It takes a village. We call our kids the Fabulous Four, and they're more like siblings than like friends. There's positives and negatives to that, but, you know, we are a community and we make our own village.
But with what Heather said, oh, go ahead, Rabbi.
Part of it is about the mother's responsibility in the preservation of culture. So much of culture is actually internalized literally by eating, you know, like what takes place at the dinner table, you know, as you said, making the challah, etc. And therein, you know, the Italians and other Mediterranean peoples also have a great desire to see their culture retain some vitality and vibrancy through the generations. So that's why, you know, there's something very similar in that, and what you find from your in-laws and what you find from your own family. Stacy?
Yeah, well, with what Heather said about like our Jewish moms or her grandmother being like the matriarch of the family and like they're the boss, you know, people say to me, well, of course you're a lawyer, you're Jewish, your choices were lawyer or doctor, right? And yes, but not because that's what my parents expected as much as that's what they turned me into. Like, it's not like, oh, you have to be a professional. It was the way we lived life and the way I saw my mom do things and the way the women set the rules and all of that, like that prepared me to be a girl boss. Like I wasn't scared to leave my firm and go out on my own. I mean, a little, but not like a normal person would be, like a Jewish person who was self-empowered and had a strong mom and knew I could do anything in the world. Like it wasn't a thought that I couldn't be a professional. Like I could be anything I wanted to be because my parents told me I could be anything I wanted to be.
Every night we told you that.
Right. And I thought that. I still think that. I'm pretty sure I could run the universe.
There is no doubt in my mind that is a deliberate front and center value as someone who looks at Jewish early childhood education separately from every other early childhood program, and knowing that those values are part of family life. The value of education, the confidence in your ability to succeed. I mean, and I will say, in the article that I found, it said the Jewish mother is the person that raises you to be the unique snowflake that you are. Yes, because that unconditional love, whether that is woven in every ritual, in every meal, in every blessing, in every hug, is something that says you matter in this world. And that is the real power to me. And combine that, as the outsider, the way I look at it is, when a Jewish mother carries the Jewishness,
Well,
then that,
Heather's like the expert at that.
okay. So back to Heather.
Heather's the expert at that because sometimes I want like a little bit my kids to like fall in a certain box, and when they don't, it freaks me out a little, and I'm not as good at embracing that. And Heather's like, let him be him, like, and Heather will like help with that a lot.
But it's important. It's important for your kids to feel that you're always proud of them. The value of quelling over every little thing that your kids do. That's my mom. You know, she can't cook to save her life, but every little thing that we do, she is proud. She advertises, and I have siblings that are very different than me, but every little thing we do, she is so proud of, and it builds that confidence, right? And so when Eli is going to be a rabbi, and so when he is goes to his rabbinical school, and he's going to do all of these things, and he's going to teach my kids to be better Jewish kids, better Jewish people, but have better Jewish hearts. He comes from such a pure place, and maybe it's not, the other kids don't understand it, but it's him, and it's special. And as long as you tell your kids everything that they do is wonderful and special, and instill in them a sense of pride in themselves. It doesn't just come from you, it comes from themselves, because you give it to them early on, that the sky's the limit. And to me, that that's the best way to be a Jewish mother. And it's important to them. It makes them feel good.
So if this is, and I'm not so sure, I'm not positive about this, but if this is part of the uniqueness of a Jewish mother and a Jewish family, then I would suggest that what it comes from is that sense that you have inherited something from the past and you want to pass something on to the future, and that you have an active role to play in that. And so that you're telling your kids what to do. You're looking at what your grandkids are doing, and you're telling them what to do. I just want to say something about my own kids. So I have 3 adult kids, and I have, or 5 adult kids and 5 grandchildren. And one of the things that I note about them, now we don't live near them, we don't live in the same place as them, is that they're very hesitant to, or very maybe even put off a little bit by too many suggestions, by parents giving too many directions, that they really want to live life on their terms based on what we have given them and what they have learned out there in the world. You guys are laughing. My oldest son, who's a therapist, he once said to me, when you suggest things all the time, what I'm hearing from you is you don't trust me. And so I always think when I'm making this suggestion, it's coming from this place of, look, I'm 68 years old. I've experienced a lot. I can help you because I've seen it. And he says then, the real learning takes place in our capacity to make our own choices, to make our own decisions, as it were, and to make mistakes. So the overimposing parent doesn't allow for that. And then that kind of creates a very insecure creature, as it were.
Well, and that's where I would jump in and say that's where Jewish humor comes from, because there's no doubt in my mind that the over involvedness is not always well received. I mean, and as you said before, don't get anybody in trouble. When we're sitting in a class with moms and we say, let's talk about your mothers and mother-in-laws, there's going to be some resentment, some lack of boundaries, etc. And I don't want to make the humor, it's something that just says I can love and accept that Jewish tradition.
I just thought of something else. If those very qualities that you're talking about, which you find so endearing in your mothers, you hate that in your mother-in-law.
Right, of course.
It's the source of a lot of conflict between Jewish daughters-in-laws and their mothers-in-law.
Because daughters can respond differently to their own mothers than they can respond to a mother-in-law. We'll have a whole mother-in-law podcast. That just has to be.
We've got to do a year on mothers.
But wait, I do have a single specific question, and it's a thread you've thrown out a few times here, Rabbi, and that is the propulsion of this tradition, of this myth, of this belonging that makes the powerful Jewish mother going forward.
Yeah.
You have said twice, Rabbi, that it's intentional. And so I need to ask the young Jewish moms, do they feel like it's a decision to protect and preserve Jewishness and Jewish culture?
Can I just correct something? It may be intentional, but it's not necessarily conscious.
Okay, so Jewish young mothers, Heather, again, I think maybe an interfaith, do you feel like that you're doing this for future generations, or you for Jewish values and Jewish identity, or for your kids and something more personal that's from connecting them to their past, or all the above?
So, I think a lot of ways it's all of the above, because we are very, very lucky to live close by to my grandmother and my mother. And, when my kids like to learn Yiddish, they think Yiddish is funny. And so, in our family, that's kind of the way we talk about Jewish. We talk about all the words and how they're funny words to say. And my grandmother, who's very sharp at 90, enjoys it. She gets a kick out of teaching them these new Yiddish words. And so it's a way to, connect, and it's a family connection. Plus, I'm very proud to be Jewish. I'm not particularly a religious person, but I enjoy the culture. I enjoy the food. I enjoy the celebrations. And, my kids pick up on that. We like the PJ library books, some more than others. And so, there are intentional ways, but maybe it is a little bit subconscious. And the reason I think that you're right, that it's subconscious, is because it brings comfort. And if it brings comfort to me, I think it also brings comfort to my kids. And so that's how I interpret that.
I'm putting my hand on my heart, because I want everybody to hold that value, that it's visceral, that the comfort of that identity, of that belonging is so beautiful for you to feel and to give to your children as going forward. Stacy?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's completely intentional. I grew up in a conservative kosher home. I don't have and I was married to someone who grew up in an Orthodox home, and we live a essentially completely non-religious life, other than being, I should say, a non-observant life, because we were just culturally Jewish. So my kids going to Jewish day school is so they get the Judaism. I mean, that's why they go, and to be part of that community, because I feel like I don't do enough, and my ex-husband doesn't do enough Jewishly at home, that they'll get enough without school or without camp and without those things. So it's so intentional. It's so intentional. But I did want to say, we make fun of the Jewish moms, and we make fun of so everybody knows. There are no boundaries with my mom and I. There are no boundaries. There's nothing she wouldn't say to me, nothing she wouldn't tell me I'm doing wrong, that I need to do better, nothing that she wouldn't step in and take over. But my life and my kids' life, especially post-divorce, I mean, it only works because my mom does that. I wouldn't function as a human, and my practice would fail and my parenting would fail. And sometimes I border on nervous breakdown when she goes away, because without that help and without that influence, like everyone is always shocked, like, how do you do everything? And I'm like, I don't. You just don't realize that my mom does. And that's why. It's because she's taking my kids to doctor's appointments. She's like, we talk about the mental load, right? And as Jewish moms, we don't share that mental load. Like, no offense, Rabbi, even though men think they help carry the mental load, it's different. They can't. But my mom actually helps carry the mental load. She's thinking about, does Eli need to go to the endocrinologist? Is Sammy, signed up for this and signed up for that? So like that
Excuse me, I
overbearing
figured
and
out a
intrusive.
I figured out a bicycle riding solution, by the way.
that overbearing and that intrusive and all of those things that we could stereotype negatively and that we make fun of our moms for, like, I would not function in my life without that. So it goes both ways.
Can I say something to that, Stacy? I think in this, you're not giving yourself credit for something. And that is, you're able to do that. You're able to accept all the help. You're able to accept all the comments, all the suggestions, because you're really confident inside of yourself. If you were insecure, it would be different. It would be different for you. So you began in this conversation by saying something like, you could do anything. You could run the universe. So you're saying you can run the universe, and yet in the position that you're in right now as a single mom who's an attorney in Boca Raton, you need your mother's help, and you gladly accept it. But that's because you're confident. It takes that. For your mom, by the way, Carol, good job, because you obviously gave her that confidence so that she can live her life that way and continue to accept the support that's around her.
So I do want to say something on that, which is kind of interesting, is that, I have two daughters, one who lives here and one who lives up in New York, different stages in their lives. But one—
Let's go with that. That was a very nice way to say it, Mom. Good job.
But one is very accepting of the help. And to be honest, well, yes, I kind of plug myself in there and maybe try to give her a little more help than what she wants. Some of that is also to say, like Stacy was saying, that I want to take this off your plate so that the time that you do have to spend, and particularly I say that the time you do have to spend with your kids, you can just spend with them, not worrying about everything. Now, she was home and my daughter from New York was home, and Stacy, I told her something about the doctor's appointments I was making, and my other daughter was shocked. She was like, "What? You do that for Stacy? How do I get in on some of this?" But
you have kids, Jessica. You have kids. That's the answer. It's for the boys.
But the reality is that she, at least at this point in her life, and I'm not sure going forward, is a different kid than Stacy and wouldn't allow me to jump in and help with those things. And so as a Jewish mother, while I may be pushy and all the rest of those things, jumping in on Stacy, I do know the boundaries, and I step back when it comes to Jessica because I know that's not something she wants me to be doing right now.
Yeah.
So you can do both.
That's the definition of wisdom.
Truly.
Discernment. Discernment.
And I'm okay with the rule pushing. Sometimes the rules from Heather's house and the things Heather says have to filter over to my house. And Eli will say, "No offense, mommy, but Heather's a little bit more responsible than you. Maybe we should do what she does." I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I'm safety mom. That's really what she's referring to. I'm safety mom. I make them wear the shoes. I if they're jumping on the couch, I'm like, you can't do that. You can't make things to take you down the stairs. I get worried about all those things. And Stacy's like, let them be kids. So
I love that full circle. That brings us to that full circle of everybody gets to be uniquely who they are to their strengths and still be that Jewish mom. Um, let's do the wrap up, and I'll give Rabbi the final word. But I kind of liked what Stacy was playing with earlier, and that is how Eli would describe a Jewish mom. And so I just ask you to sort of put yourself in somebody else's shoes, or looking back on yourself in those traits that you really love about the parts of being a Jewish mom that you really, really are. So I am a Jewish mom. What does that mean to you, Carol?
Well, it's interesting because I'm not sure that I knew growing up all of those things about a Jewish mom consciously. I clearly knew that one of my grandmothers was not really a Jewish mom, and the other definitely was a Jewish mom. And then as a young adult, I saw that my mother was not really a Jewish mom in a lot of ways, and neither was my mother-in-law, but my mother-in-law was very good at one thing, and that was the guilt, which was something that I had never experienced. It was not in my world. And so I find that's very interesting, and I would be interested to find out actually if that's something I gave my kids, because I don't know how to do that.
Oh, interesting. Stacy?
Well, I think so, but
Okay.
yeah, no, I think so. But that comes from everyone too. Like, I think that I was raised Jewishly. So, Rabbi says he lives in a Jewish world. I feel like I grew up in a Jewish world, and I went to public school, but I feel like I grew up in a Jewish world. My friends were Jewish, were mostly Jewish. I have a Jewish mom. They had Jewish moms. And to me, the biggest part of being Jewish was sleepaway camp. And so that's where, I had Judaism. So I became Jewish in all of those ways. But I think that my kids, maybe less Eli because he's older, but for sure Shabbat and food and the fact that I make them challah, like that's what makes me a Jewish mom to them. Mm-hmm. To them, that's what makes me a Jewish mom, and that I make them eat.
And we might have to come back to the guilt question. I certainly see it tied in with responsibility, community participation. If I know someone's evaluating who I am and what I do and cares that I live a good life, that I do mitzvot, then there's guilt if I don't. So, where does it get to be a slippery slope? We'll come back to that concept. But I'm not sure that all guilt is bad guilt. And Rabbi and I have had that in other conversations. So maybe guilt from your mother is the best place to get it.
I mean, I definitely
don't
have
know.
mom guilt, but my sister doesn't, and we have the same mom. So
there you go.
There you go.
Heather, what parts do you own about this I am a Jewish mom? Or what would you like people to say about you?
But to me, I would turn it upside down. That guilt comes from a place of support, and it comes from a place of belief in your child that they could always do better for themselves, better for their children, better for their families. And so, yes, there's the guilt there. My family is excellent at that, but it comes from a good place. It comes from a place where, I want you to enjoy a better life. I want you to have what I didn't have. I want you to do what I didn't have the opportunity to do, so that guilt is a sense of belief. I believe that you can do these things. I believe that you can do better. And I think it works. In my family, it works very well. The mother-in-law conversation, I can't comment because she might watch this one day, but for my mom and my family and my grandmother, especially that guilt, that it comes from a place of pride, of joy, and of wanting me to always do better than they did.
Beautiful. Rabbi, we give you the final word. Thank you.
So let me just contextual. I know you guys have been speaking about the very practical and your experiences. I just want to contextualize this. It's in an interesting way because historically, Judaism has been known as a patriarchal religion. It's the Elohei Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, right? And only in the more recent period do we begin to think about the matriarch. So specifically, when I say contextualize, This week we're reading about Rebecca, who's the like second Jewish mom. And Rebecca takes it upon herself to manipulate what's going on in the family to make sure that the son she thinks would be the right one to be the bearer of the tradition and the values of the tradition gets it. And she manipulates her husband, manipulates the whole scene so that Jacob becomes the forebearer of the people. Then moving forward throughout history, you know, the Jewish man has had all the had the voice outside the house in the community. But make no mistake about it that throughout history, it was the Jewish woman that had the voice in the home. And she was responsible to create that home and to raise those children in such a way that they would be imbued with and filled with the essence of what was Jewish.
Perfection. Thank you, Rabbi. To be continued. Thank you all for joining us.
Yeah.
Shabbat
Okay.
shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.
Don't go away.
Shalom.